Hello and welcome to another episode of Curbside. I'm your host, Ian Kayanja, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Julieann. How are you, Julieann?
I'm doing very well, Ian. We've had a lot of Belmont basketball to talk about. You know, a few games have been canceled here and there, but it's a lot better than, I thought it would be with Corona being this way and everything like that. So we definitely have a lot to talk about, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, for sure. We have a bit of change of scenery revolving you, Julieann. Where are you podcasting from nowadays?
So a few days ago, I took the 9-hour drive home to North Carolina, Creedmoor to be exact, a very small town. I just wanted to be with my family. I miss them a lot. And so I, packed up my cat bag and I drove home. And last night we put up the tree. It was very, very nostalgic, putting up all the, childhood ornaments.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm podcasting from here in North Carolina.
Well, if you run into Lucas Scott or Nathan Scott from One Tree Hill, make sure to give me a ring because I'm their biggest fan. But that's, neither here nor there. Let's dive into some Belmont basketball. They played 3 games since we last appeared on the podcast. They played Samford, Tennessee State, and then they played Lipscomb in the Battle of the Boulevard. So you were there in person for the Samford game. What did you see and kind of what did you take in as you were reporting from that game?
On the positive end, they're very efficient in scoring still, and they have been consistent with that all year. Muzinski, Murphy, Smith, and Wood both scored in double figures again, something that we expected, so that's good. I think, their defense is really good, especially their defense in transition, when the ball is stolen from them or the team is driving up the court. They're really good in being able to stop their opponent. But I think their transition offense, when they do get those steals and when they're in the not exactly open court, when there's, 2 or 3 players running down the court with them, I feel like they have a hard time making those baskets off turnovers. And I think that they're just not a very fast-paced team. They're better when they can set up the ball, which isn't a problem. But when it comes to OVC play, and we have these teams that are their game is fast. They just like to play fast. I think that it might be a little bit of trouble for them, especially if hopefully there is a tournament. I'm literally praying every day that there's a tournament here in March. But especially when they get to the tournament and they play bigger teams, they're going to have to learn how to play a little more fast-paced.
Yeah, for sure. In that Samford game, Belmont lost 96-83. Like you noted, it was very impressive to have 4 starters in double figures in that game. What was a bit worrying for me as I sat there and watched was really the bench production. You had guys come off the bench and have zeros in the scoring column and zeros in other stats. And so they got a total, I'm looking at the box score here, they got a total of 4 bench points. And that is worrying. You can't rely on 4 guys to be your entire offense. They're going to need to take breaks at some point. And the only guys on the bench that did get in the scoring column was Tate Pearson, who went 1 for 7, 1 from 6 from 3 and had a 3-pointer. And Derek Saban, who had 1 point, but no field goals made. And so that was a bit of a worrying aspect for me for the Bruins, but it was impressive to see what Luke Smith did with 24 points and Nick Muzinski, what he did in terms of getting to the line. He shot 11 free throws, and so it really made up for a lackluster first half. And overall, that game really just felt like they kind of dug themselves a deep hole in the first half and couldn't get out of it in the second. But I would have liked to see a bit more bench production for sure.
Yeah, that was very well said. Because, guys like Mitch Listow and Ben Shepherd, they came off the bench last year and they were pretty productive. And I don't know if it's, it's still the beginning of the season. They're still a little jittery. They didn't have as much time to prepare. They didn't have, summer camps. They didn't have summer training, conditioning and stuff like that. And I guess we're a little bit into it. We've played 5 games now?
Mm-hmm.
5 games. But that it goes to show in the most recent game against Lipscomb, where Mitch came off the bench and he put up 7 points. But however, that was in 21 minutes. He played 21 minutes in the Lipscomb game and only put up 7. And so it's actually funny when we get to talking about the women's, their most improved aspect of their team this year is they are putting up so many points off the bench, which when I was covering women's last year, that was not a thing at all. The bench production, I mean, you might as well just had the 5 starters show up and that was it. And so this year they're not producing off the bench as much on the men's team, and it's kind of worrying me as well because off the bench there are those players that did well off the bench last year, and so it's kind of hard to figure out what the cause of that is. But I think that once they have a little more time together, they just need to build their confidence, and I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. What makes a great team isn't necessarily just a great starting 5. And when you look at how great teams are constructed, not just at the college level, but also at the pro level, it's that you have a solid 5, but you also have 1 or 2 guys that you can count on coming off the bench. Every championship team has that. You have to have at least 7 guys. You have to at least be able to get sure production from 7 guys. And so with this Belmont team, I'm looking at the Tennessee State game where Belmont won 79-64. You had 3 starters in double figures, and then you had 1 bench guy, Jacoby Wood, but he's kind of a flex option because some games he starts, some games he doesn't. He had 10 points off the bench, but outside of that, their bench production was 1 point, 2 points, 1 point, and zeros. And so you need guys off the bench like Jacoby Wood who can come in and be a spark plug for your offense. And what are your other options when your 5 starters aren't getting going? Who's going to be the person that rights the ship? And that's a characteristic of every great team that competes, not only within their conference, but on a national level, is they have their 5 guys, but they also have 2 or 3 bench guys that they know can get it done for them. And the fact that we're not seeing that, 5-6 games into the season is a bit worrying.
It is really worrying. I honestly still have faith in players like Mitch Listow and Ben Shepherd, and even the freshman that came in, Frank Jakubasek, I think it is, and Evan Bronze. I just remember seeing them play in the Paradise Jam, and they did pretty well. They did what they needed to do when they only traveled to Washington, D.C. with 9 players to choose from. And I thought that they did pretty well then. And it just seems now that they've lost momentum. They've maybe lost confidence now that the season's really underway. Coach Casey wouldn't recruit bums. He just wouldn't. And so I know that they can do it, but it's just a matter of when. And now that we're getting nearly into conference play, we have 1 game, I think, before conference play, or 2 games. They play Tennessee State on Friday the 18th, and then Kennesaw State and Evansville right before conference play starts, their first game against Murray State, which I'm a little nervous about. But I think, they need to get into their groove pretty quickly here.
Yeah, for sure. A guy that it's been highlighted is kind of the engine of the team. Grayson Murphy missed the game against Lipscomb. He had a boot on his foot, and I saw that from the TV broadcast, and we're not really sure how long he will be out for, but it was interesting to see in that Lipscomb game how the team rallied around not having, in my opinion, their best player in Grayson Murphy, and they still got an 81-71 win in that game. And so, you watched the game, Julieann. Who would you kind of give the game ball to? Who do you feel made big plays down the stretch for the team?
Luke Smith was the leading scorer, right? Let's see how many threes he put up. He put 5 threes up. Wow. Fantastic. But in the matter of finding a way to make up for the loss of Grayson Murphy, I have to give it to Caleb Hollander. He's been a little inconsistent. He did really well in the Paradise Jam. He scored in double figures, I think 17 points against George Mason. And then ever since then he wasn't, showing up until this game. He put up 15 points, 7 rebounds. And I think that he went 6 for 8 from the field, and in 20 minutes he did all this. And I think that he stepped up when he really needed to, because, Nick Muszynski, 14 points. We know that Nick can do a lot better. Luke Smith, he's doing what he's been doing this whole time. He put up 19 points, 5 threes. Ben Shepherd put up, 10. Jacoby Wood, 11. And Jacoby could have done a lot better too. And so I really, really liked what I saw in Caleb Hollander, especially in the beginning of the game. He took that game under control when it went at first tip, and I think that he stepped up when one of their best players was down, and he did a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, the wrinkle that I was fascinated by was Nick Muszynski, 30 minutes, 7 for 11 from the field, 14 points, 8 rebounds, 7 defensive rebounds, no free throw attempts. And for a guy that's banging down low with other bigs, you'd like to see him get to the line the same way he did in the Samford game, even though they lost that game and won this one. There's a question about just how does he match up against guys that are just outright stronger or more athletic than him? And in this Lipscomb game, we kind of saw a bit of that with Asan Asadullah, who went 13 for 24, 29 points and 11 rebounds. And this isn't an aberration. This isn't something that isn't common. We've seen Nick struggle against bigs that are stronger or more athletic than him. And we think back to what happened in the SLU game against Hassan French. And how do you think that he could match up better with these bigs that he just can't straight up out muscle?
I think that he's so skillful under the basket. When he has his back to the players, he can easily I think he's not that athletic. I agree with you. He's not as athletic, but I think that he's pretty quick. And when he's under the basket and he has his back to the player, he literally is so good at just, posting up and putting it up. I think that what I've seen from Nick, he's missed a lot of, the baskets that he usually makes, like the floaters and, the finger rolls. And, we saw it in the OVC tournament, and we saw it with Sadula, guys that are just as big as him being really productive. And I think that he can do it. I just think that he's been missing the mark a little bit. I think he just misses a lot of shots that he can make. And I think that it might take some time for him to get back to the Nick Muszynski that, Belmont fans know and love. And I don't know. I think that he should, I'm sorry, hit the gym a little bit. If he got stronger, if he gained even 10 pounds, he's tall, but he's not like thick. Like a center that you really want is a little bit thicker. And so I think that if he hit the gym, he has a skill, and if he hit the gym, I think that he would be a force to be reckoned with for any team that he goes up against.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, because when you think about it, he's never really had a normal off season to work on his game outside of that red shirt freshman year, where then he comes in ready to play, and he had that great redshirt freshman season. That was the one year where he was really, working on his game all off season, versus he got hurt at the end of that redshirt freshman season, had off season surgery. And so he really was rehabbing instead of working on his game. And then this year there was Corona and gyms were closed everywhere. And so you can only work on so much at home, or meeting with your team on conference calls and such. And then you come into this season kind of the same player you were last year, just because the situation kind of held you captive. You couldn't really work on much. But it is a common theme that is now dating to 3 seasons, that when he plays these bigger athletic bigs, they sort of have their way with him, and they out rebound him, they score over him, and that shouldn't be the case when you're 7 feet tall. especially with how long he is and how skilled he is. I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation for me to say he should be able to hold his own on the defensive end against these guys.
I agree, especially with how fundamentally skilled he is in the game of basketball. I do think that, this team and teams across the nation just were dealt a really, really terrible hand. Everyone was in this entire planet, but when it comes to basketball, they really did not have an option to do the things that they usually do, and it's definitely affecting some players on this team.
For sure. And so, heading into the next stretch for Belmont basketball, you kind of talked about it a little bit. They play Kennesaw, and then they have another OVC flex type of game with Tennessee State, and then they play Evansville and Murray State. So over that 4-game stretch, what do you think Belmont's record will be when we're looking back at this thing in January?
I think they're going to beat Kennesaw State. I was researching their team. They only have one player that's very consistent, Spencer Rogers. As a freshman, he went to Troy. As a sophomore, he went to Southwest Mississippi, and now he's with Kennesaw State. And this year, he's the only player that in every game he's scored double figures, mostly up in the lower 20s. I think that they'll have Kennesaw State, just fine. Let's see, Tennessee State, they already beat them once this year, 79-64, but it is not at their home court. So, but I do think that they'll win that one. Evansville, I think that they'll win Evansville. The only game that I'm really worried about is Murray State, and that's just because of, what's packed behind that game. An intense blockbuster OVC championship between the two last year. A game where Nick Muszynski, he put up 25 points. He got the tournament MVP. And Murray State, basketball is just as much about the rivalry and the emotion of a specific game as it is about just the fundamentals of the game. And so I think Murray State, they're going to be very ready. And hopefully by then, Grayson Murphy, will be healthy and he'll be back. I have no idea what's exactly going on with him in that boot, but that is a scary sight. And if they don't have Murphy, I still think they have a good chance, but even that can, damage the entire team's confidence if they're missing one of their best players. So
right.
The Murray State game is the one that I'm honestly watching out for.
Yep. And so, let's switch gears, so to speak, to Belmont women's basketball. We last talked when they had played, I believe it was Kentucky, but since then they've beaten Middle Tennessee 70-64. They, completely routed Tennessee State 83-35. And, they lost a real barn burner on Sunday, December 13th to Marquette 64-61. And I think the most interesting matchup that we should really just dive into is this Marquette game. Julieann, you were watching that one closely. What did you think?
They lost, but I was so impressed by Tootie Jones and Destiny Wells. They absolutely killed it. Destiny Wells put up her career high. She's a freshman. She put up 21 points. She had 5 steals that each of them went up for points. Tootie Jones had 17 points and 5 steals as well. And they put their whole heart and soul into this game. And, at a certain point, they were ahead. They took the lead, and they were down by as many as 10 points at a certain point of the game. And they fought hard, and they did lose, but it's just great to see that they're going to fight until the last second, and they're going to do it as best as they can and with all their heart. And I was talking before about the bench production. In this game, there wasn't really good, efficient bench production at all. Whitney Hay had 9 points off the bench. But other than that, 2 players made up for 3 points off the bench. In the game against TSU, they had, I think, 37 points off the bench. And then against Middle Tennessee, they had 27 maybe. This game they didn't have that many points off the bench, but they're really finding their comfort zone and they're really getting stronger. And they have so many players that can show up in points. And then if they mix, the game of Destiny Wells and Tootie Jones, they're absolute dogs, by the way. They're so good. And then if they keep consistent with their bench production, what they struggled with last year, I have really high hopes about this women's team.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just the play of Tootie Jones has been astounding. In the TSU game, she had 7 steals to go along with her 11 points, and a near double-double, not in points or rebounds, points or assists, but points and steals. That's impressive. That shows, someone that's willing to do it on both ends. And I think before the season really tipped off, we were here, hypothesizing how they can, usher in this next era of Belmont basketball. And these 2 guards that they have in Destiny Wells and Tootie Jones are that next era. I mean, I think that the next 4 years with them, really the skies is the limit. Whitney Hay is another guard that really intrigues me. In that TSU game, she had 12 points off the bench. And really, it just comes across it to me as, these players are just stepping up where the team needs them most. They're not necessarily concerned about getting their numbers or getting stats or whether they're the player of the game, but they really play for each other. And that's something that, I can say is a bit unique to this year's team. Last year's team, it was kind of, as Ellie Harmeyer goes, the team goes. But I feel like this team, they play for each other and they play hard, and every possession feels like it matters. And so, yeah, they ended that 3-game stretch on a loss, but on Thursday, December 17th, they get Tennessee State again. And if it's anything like the first matchup, it'll be an easy game.
Exactly. I think it's going to be a game that builds their confidence even more, a game where they can just really seek out their strengths. I don't know how easy it's going to be for the weaknesses to show if they beat them by nearly 50 points again. But it's definitely going to be a confidence-building game. They play Alabama A&M and then Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the games they're going to point out their weaknesses. Yeah, after the fight they put up in Marquette, I'm very excited to see what they do in the Alabama A&M games and the Alabama A&M game and the Auburn game. Those 2 games are away. They will, it says it's away, but then it says it's Curb Event Center. The Auburn game is definitely away, which is going to be, it's a long drive. It's going to be very tough, but I think after the Marquette game, the fight that they put up, I think that they have a good chance.
Yeah, the game that I'm really, really looking at, especially once conference play kicks off, happens actually January 2nd against UT Martin. And then right after that, they play Southeast Missouri. And so just those 2 games in January are the ones that I've kind of circled on my calendar, as the Bruins, they'll slog through the Tennessee States and the Alabama A&Ms and the Auburns. But that Murray State game for me is where everything actually starts, and kind of everything before that does not matter as much. And, once that Murray State game kicks off, you're playing an OVC opponent, 2 days a week. And so that's where we're really going to see it day in and day out talent level and skill of this Bruins team.
Yeah, I agree. They're playing UT Martin, who was the favorite to win the entire tournament, and then Southeastern Missouri, who played such a good game and beat the UT Martin. UT Martin has Chelsea Perry once again this year. A lot of Southeast Missouri's players are returning. I just have a feeling that for both of these teams, it's just been a crazy ride that almost makes them unprepared for conference play. And I feel like because everything seems so meshed together and jumbled up, it's going to be hard for them to differentiate, if it makes sense, differentiate, conference play and non-conference play and everything. And it's just been so crazy. And I do have faith that both of these teams will keep improving and growing, into conference play. I'm just really excited to see what they do, how they play, against the teams last year that they struggled against. I'm just really excited.
Yeah, as you should be. And so really that'll do it for this week's episode of Curbside. Make sure to always keep it locked in here for all your Belmont basketball coverage. And for Ian and Julieann here, we'll catch you on the Curbside.